Hello and welcome to the ultimate Christmas. This is Wine Club by Majestic's perfect Christmas case with wines to take you through the entire festive season. Thank you so much for joining us on our webinar where we'll be tasting through each of the bottles, exploring more about the wines, how they taste, the people behind them, and lots of different food ideas for them as well. I'm here with our Master of Wine, Beth, and our Wine Club Director, Mark, and together we'll be tasting through and talking about the wines, discussing them, getting the most possible out of them. If you're watching as we broadcast on Facebook, please do get involved, comment, ask any questions that we don't cover here, and someone will get back to you straight away. If you're watching later on the Facebook page or on YouTube, please do still drop us a line, leave a comment on Facebook, and we'll try and get back to you as soon as we can. If you'd like to know more about how to taste wine, please look at either of our previous webinars that should be still on the Facebook page, and Beth will take you through a detailed look at how to taste wine, how to appreciate the most out of the aromas and flavours that you get in a wine through a really detailed approach to tasting a wine. Today, we're going to focus more on the food matching, but also talk about decanting, which is maybe something that may come up more at this time of year as you open more special bottles, maybe big, slightly older red wines, and you want to know a bit more about decanting. So Beth, I'll ask you this to start. How and why might you decant a wine?
So there's a couple of reasons you might decant a wine. One of the reasons is older wines might have some sediment. This is completely natural production due to aging. Just it will fall out of the wine naturally. And you don't want a big load of sediment in your mouth, so you might decant to remove the sediment, leave the sediment in the bottle, and you'd have the wine in the decanter. The other reason, and this can be applied to most wines, is just to get some more oxygen into it. It's obviously been cooped up in a bottle for several years, or even a year if it's a younger wine, and so just getting some oxygen really helps bring out some of that fruit, and it's why you swirl a wine in glass. Most wines can benefit from just a quick decant. It doesn't have to sit there for hours, but just literally the action of pouring it into the decanter will introduce the oxygen into the wine and really bring out the flavours.
Sure, and it doesn't need to be anything fancy, does it? I mean,
really
we're drinking our water here from a sort of carafe-shaped water jug. You could use something like this if you have something at home. We've got a slightly fancier, I think, port decanter here, which we will pour one of the red wines into later, so you can see how that works. But really, you can use anything, maybe just a jug. You can double decant if you want to, again, to really give a wine lots of oxygen, which just means pouring it into the jug or decanter and then pouring it back into the bottle if you want to serve it in the bottle. So really, you don't have to worry about having the right decanter. I think it's more about
the action.
The action, exactly, yes. The process. We'll have a go at decanting one of our reds later, so you can see just how easy it is. And then to talk about glassware as well, because we've got our decanter and glassware feature on the back of your case insert here. We talk a little bit about glassware, and again, you might be thinking more about glassware at this time of year as you come to serve your most special wines. Maybe you have family, friends round to celebrate for special occasions. And I think our top tip really with serving wines out of glasses is, if you want to get the most out of a wine, you probably want a glass that has this basic shape. It's called a tulip-shaped glass. And really all that matters is just that you have a base that is slightly wider than the top of the glass here. That means all of the flavours and aromas are going to be directed up towards your mouth and your nose when you're enjoying the wine. Other than that, kind of anything goes. It certainly doesn't have to be expensive or fancy. I don't know, everyone's probably got their own glass preferences. What do you guys like to drink out of?
Well, to be honest, yeah, just a standard white wine glass I use for most wines. It's quite flexible. It's even good for champagne, because I know champagne traditionally you serve in a flute, but I mean they tend to be straight up, and I mean you can't swirl it, and there's so much complexity in champagne from aging. Being able to swirl a champagne, I mean they're designed to keep the bubbles in, so obviously there might be that preference, but to really get the most out of a champagne, especially if you purchase a really good vintage, I mean I would suggest trying it from a white wine glass, so you can swirl it, get the fruit and complexity of flavours.
Yeah, just what I was going to say. So if you've gone for a more expensive special vintage champagne or something with a really full flavour, you'll want a bigger glass to get the most out of those flavours. I mean, champagne coupes are glorious and very celebratory, but probably more for the effect than the flavours, I'd say.
Yes.
Yeah.
more fun over function, I think.
Yes,
But they
fun
are
over function.
They are
very nice.
pretty.
But they are very pretty, exactly.
And I might have some coupes at home.
Yeah, they feel pretty fabulous for certain occasions. And so for white and red then, would you say typically you need a different glass for white and red wines?
So generally, a red wine glass can be slightly bigger and broader, again to try and get more oxygen into it. But you don't have to make it complicated. You can get, you know, a good glass that works, is very versatile and works across everything. My husband doesn't let me have multiple glass types at home. We did at one point, and he's made me rationalise them. So I've just got a really great all-rounder.
Sure. So I mean, something probably pretty much like this,
Yep.
a decent size. Say not wildly big. It's nice and comfortable, easy to hold, but you're going to get a lot out of both white wines and red wines in this. So essentially, if you have an all-rounder glass like this, you're probably going to get the most out of most red and white wines. So if we move on to food, which is again a gorgeous feature of this time of year. I'm sure all of you have some really special meals and celebration events planned with some wonderful dishes. We were talking earlier about the kind of wines that go best for Christmas, and I think the word that came up was versatility. There are so many different flavours and dishes which are traditional at this time of year. Wines that are going to go really well will be wines that can match with a variety of different flavours, different dishes. That's something we'll pick up as we go through. Have you guys got any tips for festive seasonal food and wine matching, or what are your favourite Christmas food and wine matches?
So, I mean, with the roast dinner on the Christmas day, we tend to go quite classic with white, usually a Chardonnay, not too heavily oaked, usually something from Burgundy. It just goes well with the variety of dishes on the table in one go. And for the same principle, I try and go with a very versatile red wine. So I try and avoid things like Bordeaux and kind of pump for maybe a Rioja, kind of a lighter, fruitier Rioja, or something Grenache based.
Excellent.
And for me, I think at this time, you need to think about relatives, in-laws, and their taste as well. So I would have maybe something that I would enjoy, but it wouldn't necessarily, it would be something I would be treating myself with, but wouldn't necessarily be appreciated by others gathered. So
you're not saving the best stuff for yourself, are you?
I am, yeah, guilty as charged. But I think it's also worth bearing in mind that, you know, something that is going to cost a lot of money and is going to be a classic wine won't necessarily appeal to everyone you have at the lunch table. So I would splash out and get a range of wines.
Right, we're going to kick off with our ultimate Christmas wines. Now, very excitingly, we're going to try and open these sparklings live on camera, mainly to see how well Beth holds up under pressure. But I think really so we can talk a bit about the proper way to open a bottle of sparkling wine, which is, I don't know, better, safer, potentially, less fun than shaking it up. But
there's a lot of pressure in the bottle. And you don't want that to all explode out. So as fun as the Formula One Grand Prix spraying everyone is, what I quite like to do is actually drink the champagne and have as much as possible to drink.
I think I heard that the pressure inside that bottle is the equivalent of the pressure within the tyre of a London double-decker bus.
Oh, wow.
Crikey.
So
yeah.
it's...
Well, I mean, those bubbles have been building up for many, many, many years, haven't they?
They have done. So, I mean, there's a couple of things you can do. So obviously you have the cage that goes over the cork. Now, if you're feeling nervous about taking the bottle off or want a bit of extra grip, one trick is just to leave the cage on and kind of twist with that on top, just to give yourself some extra grip there. What you want to make sure is this is not pointing in anyone's face, because as Mark has just pointed out, it's got quite a lot of pressure in the bottle. And what you actually want to do is twist the bottle rather than the cork. And effectively, just try and keep pushing the cork bottle back into the bottle until it makes that noise.
Satisfying.
That was absolutely sublime. Amazing work.
I might have just blinked quite a lot. I do trust myself. My mother's from Champagne, so I don't think I've disappointed her there.
I mean, wow, there would have been no excuse if you'd got that wrong. But yeah, that was beautifully done.
An interesting thing with the cork is you can just see that it's quite flared, but a champagne bottle that has been aged for quite a long time, you'll see that actually it doesn't flare out. So just a fun random fact for you there.
Also, it's a normal shaped cork that goes into the bottle, like a straight down cork, and it's the pressure from the bottle that creates the mushroom shape. So,
and all of that pressure comes from the yeast. So there's no injected CO2.
So yes, so champagne is made with the champagne method, where essentially a base wine is made, just like a normal white wine. It's put into the bottle with some additional, just a small amount of yeast and sugar, and a second fermentation takes place in the bottle that the wine is sold in. So it means every bottle is essentially individual that you buy. After the fermentation, the yeast dies and falls to the bottom of the bottle, and this turns into what we call the lees. And it's this aging on the lees that really gives champagne the flavour that it's associated with. So this has been aged for 30 months, which is double the amount of time, the minimum amount of time that a non-vintage should be aged, which is 15 months. Now, the other interesting thing about champagne is it's made from a blend of white and red grape varieties. So this one is predominantly Pinot Noir, and essentially the juice is pressed away from the skin, so you don't get any of the colour, you just kind of get that fruit flavour and kind of additional richness. And then there's a small amount of Chardonnay in here as well, just for elegance. So different styles of champagne result from kind of the different amount of red and white grapes in there.
So would you say that Chardonnay gives a lighter style champagne?
Chardonnay tends to give a lighter style of champagne, though interestingly, if it's aged for longer, I feel it takes on the autolysis a lot more and can be a lot more toasty.
What's the autolysis?
Autolysis, that's a very winey word. It's kind of that kind of toasty flavour that you get from the aging on the lees.
That's when the yeast cells break open, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think, yeah. Mm.
And when we're tasting sparkling wine, I mean, much of the time we'll be drinking it, maybe at a party or an event, and really enjoying it. If we do want to get a bit more technical and go through the tasting process, what would you do differently to tasting still wine?
To be honest, not very much. I mean, the only thing is if you put your nose in it and take a massive whip, then the bubbles I find can go out my nose and make me sneeze. So just a bit more cautious, but essentially I would swirl the wine in the same way and really try and get the flavour and aromas out. I'd say they've aged this wine for 30 months, so there should be lots of complexity there to look for.
That smells of Christmas morning to me.
That's delicious. Isn't it?
Christmas breakfast.
It is delicious. This is my first champagne of the day.
I should hope so. So while we're just having a bit of an initial nose and taste, we'll actually introduce the champagne. This is the Léonce d'Albe champagne, made by VEUVE.
So the winemaker that made this wine actually won International Wine Challenge Winemaker of the Year for sparkling wine in 2020. So
Top class people behind the helm.
Really is. So this champagne is actually from a region in the south of Champagne called the Côte de Bar. And I think along with the Pinot Noir, what you notice on the palate is it's a lot broader than some champagnes. The acidity is really nicely balanced. I think this is a really nice, approachable, kind of really easy drinking champagne, really great for Christmas.
It's got some lovely roundness, hasn't it?
It really has.
It's not a sort of sharp, super fresh linear champagne. It's got some nice warmth about it almost, isn't it?
And I think that richness of flavour probably makes it really mean it will go well with quite a lot of canapés.
Absolutely, which is, again, one of these lovely versatile wines that we mentioned. I think champagne, of course, you don't need to eat anything with champagne. It's delicious by itself, but it is also a classic match for canapés, and you don't typically just have one type of canapé. You might have lots of different flavours. So something like this that will match well is absolutely perfect. Our lovely friends at Dine Indulge have designed a recipe of a beetroot and feta Wellington. A lovely little canapé for this, which would be perfect. You can already feel that some of those nice rich fruit flavours would go beautifully with the sweetness of the beetroot. And you get those sort of crumbly pastry flavours already in the champagne, which again would match really well with it as a canapé.
And there is acidity still in the champagne, which would match a feta.
Yeah, absolutely. That's beautiful. But I mean, champagne, a classic match with, as we say, a variety of canapés, seafood starters, oysters, smoked salmon, so many of those lovely indulgent fish and seafood Christmas dishes.
But who needs any excuse to drink champagne?
Well,
especially in Christmas.
it's
Absolutely.
a natural palate cleanser, so
Well, there we
you
are.
need it between every course.
There we go. Or indeed something to pop on New Year's Eve. Sad as I am, I'm going to pour the champagne away. And
It's criminal, isn't
it is. It really does feel criminal with champagne. And move on to our second wine, which I will also ask Beth. Let's see if it was a fluke the first time, or whether
Definitely
the
not
second
a fluke.
time can go just as well. So we're on to Crémant de Loire. This is the VEUVE AMIOT ELISA Crémant de Loire. So Crémant de Loire, it is a sparkling wine. It is not champagne, because champagne can only be called champagne if it is made in the Champagne region of France.
It's made in the same way.
Yes, exactly. It's made in the same way as champagne, but it is not champagne just because it is from a different region of France. So the same way being the secondary fermentation method that Beth was talking about earlier. What else is different then in this wine to champagne?
So this is a blend. It was predominantly Chenin Blanc with some Chardonnay as well. So as we were just talking about, the previous wine had a lot of Pinot Noir, which made a kind of richer style. We're expecting this to be kind of much crisper. Chenin gives kind of very appley fruit and a very fresh character.
Again,
Look at
beautifully done. Oh, so that time, look, Beth didn't take the cage off, so kept it on for safety,
yeah, there you
but
go.
also still achieved the perfect result. Excellently done.
So the wine is
Thank you.
from the Loire Valley, and the VEUVE in the title, as in Veuve Clicquot, relates to the fact that the winery was started by a widow. Veuve means widow. And this was the VEUVE ELISA AMIOT, and so this cuvée is named after her. I think the advantage of Crémant is, it's a lot kind of more approachable often than champagne, fresher flavours, so it's really great for like a sparkling wine lover, someone maybe that drinks Prosecco normally, but just with a touch more complexity. So I think it's a really great growing area in the UK, and it's really exciting to see so many Crémants coming over here now.
Sure.
And this, there is still complexity there, but it makes it really lovely, kind of perfect fizz for a party, or just Christmas Eve, or if you just need something to top up that box fizz.
You get some lighter, fresher fruit notes of sort of pear and apple, don't you?
Yeah, that's really the Chenin Blanc coming through.
Yeah, sure.
So not getting as much of the sort of yeasty characteristics in this one.
No, so as opposed to the champagne that was aged for 30 months, this has been aged for 12 months.
Okay.
I think you just get a nice toastiness, but as Amy was saying before, you really get lots and lots of fruit on the palate as well.
Yeah.
It's actually really kind of a really juicy sparkling wine, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. I think the comparison with Prosecco is a nice one. I think this has got echoes of a really good quality Prosecco, hasn't it? Some of those same nice, refreshing fruit characteristics.
Yeah.
In terms of food, I think this is an interesting one as well. Certainly that freshness gives it, again, great versatility. I think it's going to go well with a lot of salads and cold dishes. Maybe if you're doing a really special starter to one of your Christmas celebration meals. Dine and Indulge have paired it with a lovely beef carpaccio salad, which is really interesting. I think sparkling wine is actually generally very versatile with food.
Yeah, because it tends to be richer than maybe a white wine, so you can have maybe that beef flavour that you wouldn't necessarily pair with a white wine.
No, exactly, and the natural refreshingness is going to cut through any of the fat or the richer flavours really well. So I think that's a great match. But as you say, any cold dishes, salads, probably again fish and seafood would be a nice match for.
For sure.
Oh,
Both
definitely.
of those are superstars. I love them.
Yeah, but it's getting your mouth watering, isn't it? This is a perfect aperitif wine,
Really
something to enjoy at the start of a meal, start of a party. Beautiful bottle. Okay, well, I think that's the end of the bottles you have to open, sadly, because that was fun.
I can't show off anymore.
No, indeed. Until we get to the decanting, maybe that's one for you too. So we'll start with the white. So heading to Italy with our first wine, first white wine, we have the CRISTINA ASCHERI Gavi.
Yeah, so, a lot of time at Christmas people would have maybe a bottle of Sancerre or Fume, but we just wanted to do something a bit different. Gavi from northwest Italy, so the same region as where Barolo comes from, but just slightly east. You have that kind of warmth of the Mediterranean climate, but I mean, the Piemonte is up close to the Alps, so there's a lovely coolness that comes down. You get really lovely kind of peach fruit, but hopefully a bit of minerality as well that kind of rivals some of those classic regions in France.
And actually, it's not just Gavi, it is in fact a Gavi di Gavi, isn't it? Which means it's from the best quality part of the region.
Or one of the kind of central villages. There's a few Gavi di different places, but yes, Gavi di Gavi is probably the most famous.
Sure.
And again, I guess, you know, Sauvignon Blanc can be, you know, very aromatic, and this, with its kind of softer stone fruits, is just more versatile, again, going a wider range of foods at Christmas time, we thought.
Yeah.
And yeah, ASCHERI are one of my favourite producers.
Oh, it's got some lovely stone fruit, hasn't it? Some lovely sort of peachy intensity, but definitely wrapped up with a minerality, isn't it? Sort of get those nice mineral, refreshing notes that keep it in balance.
We tasted a lot of Gavis to find the perfect kind of concentration, but elegance.
Yeah, concentration is the word. I think there's a lot going on in this wine, but it's something innate to Italian wines particularly, I think. But it's hard to drink this without starting to think about food, I think, and the kind of foods you'd enjoy it with. Typically, any Italian food would go well, any sort of special Italian Christmas dishes. Dine Indulge have paired it with a lovely arancini, a nice sort of delicious ball of coated risotto. It would be lovely with a luxury risotto, maybe if you made a sort of special truffle risotto or a pumpkin risotto maybe. But I think, again, its concentration will make it versatile with a lot of different dishes. But I think particularly vegetarian dishes, I'd say.
Yeah, but also I think some seafood starters, you have got that acidity there, and kind of concentration that would stand up to like rich salmon flavours. So yeah,
I think this would have a broad appeal as well. Again, thinking of guests at this time of year. So, gets my vote.
Very good, yeah, mine too. So on to our next white, from all the way across now in Chile. We have the Cuvée Alexandre Chardonnay from LAPOSTOLLE.
Excellent. As I said earlier when Amy asked me my favourite grape varieties for Christmas, I mean, Chardonnay is just so flexible. We'll go with a wide variety of dishes, and so I think it is an essential on the table to go with turkey. This wine is from Casablanca, so right in the south of Chile, lovely cool climate, lots of influence from the Pacific Ocean, but it's also been oak just to give it a bit more concentration.
Yeah, long growing season, would you say?
Very long growing season, which gives it lots of depth of flavour, and hopefully we'll see on the palate there should be lots of breadth to the palate, but a really nice acidity as well.
I mean, certainly that oak is starting to come through on the nose, isn't it? That smells like it smells like luxurious oak. I don't really even know if that's a thing, but it feels like it's the right kind of oak for Christmas, definitely.
Yeah.
Well integrated. It's not overblown.
No.
You know, it balances very, very well.
Yeah, lots of rich stone fruit, and then kind of really kind of ripe vanilla, kind of toasty oak there. To be honest, it's almost like dinner in a glass.
Yes, it really is. Delicious.
That's pretty complex.
Wow. That's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's so concentrated on the palate, but as I said, that you are getting that acidity you expect from that kind of coastal influence that makes it rich but not over the top. So yeah, just classic for pairing with food.
Yeah, the concentration is amazing. The length is fantastic, isn't it? That's going to be great at a dinner where you've got lots of different things going on, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, as Beth says, I think if you're looking for a white that can handle, for instance, everything you get on a Christmas dinner plate, you know, you've got your turkey, but you've got your gravy and your sausages and your bacon and your stuffing and your different vegetables, and I feel like that could take it all on. But equally, though, a million other things. I mean, so as part of a really special meal, Dine Indulge suggested a little palate cleanser for us with some granita with a lovely little lemon mascarpone topping, and I think we've picked up that even the Chardonnay would match beautifully with the creaminess of that mascarpone, and certainly if you're lingering over a glass of this alongside many different dishes moving through a meal, it will not let you down. This is a wine that will really perform in many different situations.
Dependable.
Yes, more than dependable, I'd say. Yeah, really great. Okay, that is the end of our whites. So we move on to the reds. with our Rioja Gran Reserva to start.
A lot of people think that Gran Reserva denotes the quality of the wine, whereas it's actually to do with the aging of the wine. So Gran Reserva wines need a minimum of 5 years aging or 60 months, of which 24 months, 2 years is in oak. And this wine is a blend of American and French oak. Now, traditionally Rioja tends to be aged in American oak, which gives really kind of rich, coconutty, toasty vanilla notes. But just using a small amount of French oak in there adds an extra layer of complexity, and you see kind of more kind of clove, mocha kind of flavours coming through. The grape blend here is majority Tempranillo, which is what you'd expect from a Rioja, and that gives really kind of plush, ripe strawberry flavours, but there's also some Graciano, which is the local grape variety that gives really lovely perfumed notes, and Mazuelo as well. And Graciano and Mazuelo also give the wine a bit more body and acidity.
And so this is 2012. So I mean, this is nearly got a decade of aging going on already.
So yeah, I mean, so I'd say it's minimum 5 years, but as Amy points out, most producers will age Gran Reservas for a lot longer. And even though the Gran Reserva doesn't denote quality, the best producers, such as this one, will only release a Gran Reserva in the best years.
So what would you expect that long aging to show on the nose?
So you'd expect that strawberry fruit to become a bit more evolved, and kind of maybe you'd have some savoury notes there as well. Though there's quite a bit of oak on there, after 10 years it's kind of softened and integrated into the wine. So you have a lovely kind of big bowl of strawberries with coconut and vanilla and kind of rich kind of savoury clove notes as well. Just kind of a big complex bowl of wine.
Sure. Yeah, some of those delicious, as you say, sort of spicy, developed, quite Christmassy notes, actually. It is a very appropriate wine for this time of year.
Yeah, there is something like, there's some cinnamon on, and like that kind of Christmas spice, isn't there?
So I wasn't getting it, but now I am. And that's, we've said it before, but that's why it's fun to taste wine with friends and just throw out ideas, because that's the way you trigger associations and build up your own knowledge, and you have fun in the process.
Absolutely. It is, at this time of year, if you are around with friends and family, if any of the others have an interest in tasting and getting to know more about wines, crack these open with them. You've got the brochures with all the information. Taste and test and try together, because as Mark says, it's such a nice way to discover and explore and just get used to talking about wine as well.
So I think on the palate, the tannins after 10 years have softened quite a lot, and that's really approachable. And I think that kind of softer tannins will make it great with a variety of dishes.
But this has thrown a sediment, do you think?
That's a good question. Potentially it could have done. So yes, after 10 years, you probably want to pour it quite carefully. But I think we'll do some decanting with our next wine as well.
Absolutely. Coming back to food on this one, I think, yeah, again, we come back to this versatility, because while this is a really complex wine with those lovely, deep, spicy notes from the aging and from the production, it's not a huge wine in terms of weight and body, is it? It will match with medium-bodied kind of foods, medium flavours. So actually, Dine Indulge have paired it with a lovely stuffed butternut squash recipe, and I think, yeah, those, you know, Beth was talking about strawberry flavours. We're not talking about really great big deep dark flavours. It's those more medium fruity flavours which will then match really nicely with vegetables, yeah, particularly roast butternut squash, that sort of thing, with that sweetness. I mean, it's a really interesting dish with lots going on. So again, a good complex wine is going to match it really well. But I feel like this wine could take a lot of different dishes.
Yeah, and if, you know, we're talking about the complexity in the wine, and we're getting lots of different things from it. One thing that we would recommend is that if you're trying to search for all those different elements, don't just keep your nose stuck in the glass, because it becomes desensitized. So it's just a quick sniff and then away and then back again. And this keeps rewarding every sniff with something new.
Absolutely, yeah. You'll see excellent wines like this really start to develop in the glass, so it's worth keeping coming back to it, as Mark says, absolutely.
Well, actually, to be honest, I'm getting a lot more fruit and kind of savoury notes too from when we first poured it, yeah. Which is the whole point of decanting.
Indeed, which brings us so neatly on to our next wine. So again, we will sadly pour that one away, but Moving on, so we move on to our Chateauneuf de Pape. Here we have our AIMEE ARNOUX Chateauneuf de Pape. Now we are gonna decant it into our lovely decanter here, which we think might be a port decanter in style, but you really can use anything. Beth, would you like to do the honours here? Or?
To be honest, I'm better at the champagne.
Yeah, there we go. That's been just right. It falls to me then to try. I mean, essentially you'll see though how easy. I'm just going to pour it in. I'll be a little bit careful at the end just to check to see if there is. It does look like sediment, although it's quite a dark bottle, so it might be tricky to see. If you are decanting a bottle for sediment, what you can do is use a light sort of behind the neck here. Actually, I think it's just behind the shoulder. So as you pour and as the wine comes out, you start shining a light through so you can actually see when the sediment starts to collect, and then you can stop pouring the wine before your sediment comes out into the decanter as well. But here with the wine that we're really aging, it's still quite young. This is 2020. We know this is going to be a big-bodied wine, really full. We want to give it some air and some time to sort of open up. So I'm pouring it in just very easily here, pouring it down the side of the decanter, giving it lots of space to oxygenate and really get those flavours flowing. I have spilt a little bit, oh dear. Oh no, I'm laying the side down here, I'm afraid.
So we can enjoy this now, even though it's young, but I guess it's got aging potential too?
I would guess so, yeah. Beth, what do you think?
Yeah, so Chateauneuf de Pape is generally a blend, and this is a blend. You can use up to 13 different grape varieties, but you have kind of Grenache in it, which tends to provide quite bright red fruit and can be good for early drinking, but they blend it with Syrah and VEUVE, which are kind of a lot deeper and richer and meatier, and they're very, very good. They give the wine good aging potential. And in the wine, there's also a small amount of Tenet that just adds to the smoothness of the wine as well.
So I did see a little bit of sediment as I was pouring. I was sort of looking over the top, just over a paler background, and it was possible to see just a small amount as I got to the last few bits of wine, so I stopped. You'll see there's just a small amount left in the bottom. And now I have the challenge of trying to pour a glass of wine from the decanter, which is more fun. But let me pour out so Beth, you can start telling us about how it tastes.
Okay. So on the nose, we're getting a lot of those red fruits that you'd expect, kind of rich, kind of baked strawberry notes, but there's also some black fruits there as well. I'm getting some blackberry, and there's quite a bit of spice and just a hint of meatiness. This is kind of the rich style of wine that I look forward to on a Boxing Day with beef Wellington.
Oh yeah. I mean, or even your classic boxing. I know we're skipping ahead to food matching, but even a classic Boxing Day spread with everything. You know, that's where you start piling on your chutneys and your cured meats, and this would absolutely stand up to it all, wouldn't it?
Okay, let's see how it feels on the palate. Yeah. Chateauneuf de Pape is in the southern Rhône, so you're getting quite southerly in France, so the climate is getting a lot warmer and kind of more Mediterranean, and I think you really do get that kind of richness of fruit that you'd expect from a much warmer region. And that really adds to the body, the concentration and the silkiness of the tannins.
Absolutely.
And even though it's pretty young, it's very approachable, isn't it?
It is really approachable.
I think it's that silkiness that really helps. It's as you say, lots of flavour, lots of tannins, but it's just a pleasure to drink even now. I mean, it's definitely one to linger over as well. I'd imagine this would keep opening up in the glass. I mean, the decanting will help, of course, but it will continue to develop, won't it?
Yeah, and to be honest, I think the decanting has really helped kind of bring out some of those fruit flavours.
Yeah, so I mean, like we were saying, this could really stand up to a lot. This is a perfect wine for winter dishes. I mean, it is a great wine for Christmas, for this time of year when you want to get your best bottles out on the table. You know, you put a bottle of this Chateauneuf de Pape on the table and everybody's going to really sense that it's a special occasion. It will add an extra something. But then in terms of flavours and how it matches with dishes, it will just pair perfectly with all of those lovely, rich, deep flavours. I think we have here, you know, put it with the classic mixed dish of lots of different flavours going on, some roast meats, some bacon, some stuffing, lots of different vegetables. Again, there is so much in this wine that can match all of those different flavours on a Christmas table.
And the common theme, I think, is versatility, as we said before.
Yeah.
That's why you chose these wines. And I think, demonstrated here.
Although, I mean, because there's a little bit of maybe dried fruit flavour and because there's so much lovely fruit sweetness, it could almost take you through potentially to a Christmas pudding and then maybe even onto cheese. I think
yes,
this one. I
yes.
think this could go the distance. I think, couldn't it?
You say that, but the next wine I think
Yes,
is the
absolutely.
one I'm really excited about.
Indeed, we have something to match that even better. So that does indeed bring us on to what is in fact our last wine. And this is, I mean, surely the ultimate Christmas wine. So we have a Tawny port from Fonseca.
Okay, there are two main types of port, Ruby and Tawny. Now, Ruby is the one that most people will probably be accustomed to, and that encompasses things that are labelled as Ruby, but also late bottled vintage and vintage. And they'll be aged in the normal way you'd expect for red wine, and they'll be really kind of rich ruby in colour. Tawny, on the other hand, is put into barrels that are only 5/6 full, and so there's a layer of oxygen that sits over the wine, and that gives the wine, that ages the wine oxidatively, which gives it a kind of tawny colour, hence name Tawny port. It also changes the fruit and just general aromas that you'd expect, and you get much more kind of toffee, toasty nuts, dried fruit aromas. And to be honest, this is my favourite style of port. It's great with cheeses like a normal Ruby port would be, but it's also really good with like chocolate dishes, like a chocolate log, which I love at Christmas.
So you mentioned some of the flavours and aromas that we'd expect to see here, as opposed to the maybe more fruit-based, deeper Ruby port. So this is going to be what? I mean, will you still get some fruit on this?
Yeah, but because it's aged oxidatively, it tends to be more dried fruit, whereas a Ruby port you'd expect kind of more fresh, bright, rich, kind of maybe slightly not jammy, but kind of baked.
I'm getting
fruit.
toffee apple.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it is really that kind of toffee, hazelnut, the kind of richer nuts, walnuts, really kind of deep, rich. And then because the way port is made, where they try and, it's a really short fermentation where they try and extract as much colour as possible, hence the foot treading traditional scenes that you expect from videos and that kind of thing. They do that to really extract as much out of the grapes in a short period of time, and then they fortify it after just a short amount of time of fermentation, and that's what preserves the sweetness in the wine.
Because the yeast hasn't gobbled up all the sugar.
No.
Sure. And it comes through beautifully in this, as you say, sort of notes of toffee and caramel and those nice sort of almost slightly more sticky molasses, kind of deep flavours of different kinds of sugar.
And yeast can't operate above about 16% alcohol, so this at 20%, the yeast completely killed off.
Game over for the yeast.
It's a game over for the yeast. You just get a really yummy, toasty wine.
With, again, I think some of those really familiar Christmas kind of spices. Would you say some of the cinnamon and clove coming through again?
So on the palate and the way it's aged, with a Ruby port you might expect more tannins, but this is much softer because the oxidative process kind of takes those tannins out and just leaves a really kind of rich, sweet red wine. But there's a really lovely acidity there as well.
Yeah, it's particularly fresh for what you might think might be a sort of really big sweet.
Yeah, so it's not cloying at all.
No, not at all.
But there is enough sweetness there that you can pair it with chocolate dishes.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, I mean, Dine and Indulge they've really gone above and beyond. They've paired two wonderful dishes with this, which I think, again, comes back to the versatility. It is, again, a wonderfully versatile wine. But particularly, as Beth mentioned, I think would match very well with chocolate. We've got a wonderful chocolate dessert if you want something a bit different at Christmas, or indeed a celebratory meal around this season. But if you're just serving a great big indulgent cheese board and just want something to sit with that and linger over for hours, this would be perfect as well. We probably should say it's unlikely, but if you don't finish the bottle, this keeps pretty well, doesn't it, Tawny port?
Yeah, so normally wine in my fridge doesn't really last more than a day, but generally it would last a day or two if you make sure the cork's in firmly and you get it chilled. Even a red wine, if you're keeping it a couple of days, is great to keep in the fridge just to preserve it. But port will keep for about a month whilst open. The other thing to say on Tawny port is it's really great just slightly chilled. So just put it in the fridge for half an hour to an hour before serving. Because there are less tannins, it really brings out kind of that raisiny, nutty, toffee flavour. Yeah, so it's great, slightly chilled.
So a month, no point keeping it in the cupboard for a year for next Christmas.
No, I mean it's still a wine, so
Yeah.
make
I'd
sure
be
you drink it up
surprised.
that winter.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if it lasted over a month. I think
Indeed.
it's going to see you through Christmas and New Year very happily. So that brings us to the end of our ultimate Christmas case. Thank you so much for joining us. I really hope you've enjoyed tasting your way through the wines that will take you through the entire festive season. We've had a wonderful time here. It's been lovely to delve into these really indulgent luxury wines that really do make up our perfect Christmas. Please do get involved on the Facebook page, leave a comment, leave any questions that you'd like us to answer. Do let us know what you think about these wines and let us know how you'll be celebrating at Christmas, what you'll be eating and drinking, because we would love to see. So on behalf of everybody at Wine Club by Majestic, we'd like to say
Merry
Christmas.
Christmas.